One of Formula E's most identifying features, if not the most identifying feature, are the circuits the championship races on. City street circuits bringing the action to the doorstep of the fans. But the question is, how do Formula E decide where to race? And how are those tracks designed and built to turn what are regular streets and locations into the all-action battlefield that is a Formula E racetrack? I'm Saunders CB, and this is Formula E Explained. This is about as expert and highly skilled as it gets. Very specific skill sets and a deep understanding of all things track design and homologation, local government diplomacy, sporting and racing integrity, safety, sustainability, and much, much more are all required to bring a Formula E racetrack to life. So where do we start? Let's go back to the very beginning of the process.
To put a track together, the first thing that needs to be done is what is called a feasibility study. A survey that looks at 2 or 3 different locations within a city and where track designers, alongside engineers, can establish potential race locations, making measurements and looking at who may be impacted if a race were to take place in those locations. Now, once the best options are found, high-level designs are put together and submitted to the city for approval. Now that includes any civil works that may need to be done to make it possible. Things like road improvements, resurfacing, any movement of street furniture, that sort of thing. It takes around 2 years from the initial feasibility study for a track to become part of the racing calendar. There's a lot of work, collaboration and relationship building that has to be done to get a race location across the line.
So any decision and agreement has been made on where the race will take place. The city streets, the grounds, the area of the city that will host the racetrack has been set. Then the design work begins.
The first thing to consider when thinking about this process are the differences between the temporary Formula E street circuits and the more traditional permanent circuits used across the majority of motorsport. There's a lot that needs to be thought about, and it's not just about building the perfect racetrack. Formula E circuits need to be designed and built to fit around existing locations, yet still meet the needs of the championships and FIA requirements.
So the difference between a pop-up or a temporary street circuit and a permanent track, now you have less space. You are constrained by the environment that you want to put that racetrack in. You can't move buildings. Now the FIA regulations, I think, state that it's around 12 meters is the optimal racetrack width. We've had some race circuits where it's 8 meters and less in certain locations. So, you have to work very closely with the FIA's Circuit Commission, looking at the designs of the racetrack to make sure it's safe, because, ultimately we've got to protect the cars, the drivers, and the spectators. We have to get creative to reverse engineer a racetrack into an existing location. Here in London at Excel, we had a blank canvas to a certain extent. What can we do with it? We can go through the building. Everyone said, no, you can't possibly do that, but here we are. It's a challenge, the safety aspects, the pit lane. In a normal world, the pit lane needs to be about 200 meters long to fit in garages that are 15 meters wide each. You've got 12 teams, you've got the FIA garage, and that's not an easy thing to do in a city. And again, that's where it comes down to being creative and changing some of what is an established format in motorsport. Everyone knows that a pit lane is a long, straight pit lane. But in actual fact, we've had pit lanes in the world where we've had garages opposite each other with a dual pit lane, because that was the only way that we could fit it into the space that was available. Hong Kong was a classic example of that. You can't just do regulation changes in a lot of other sports and a lot of other motorsport championships. But because of where we've come from, because we're new, because we're innovative and we're changing the game a little bit, we're able to do that and say to the FIA, look, let's do this a bit differently this time to make the track work. And the great relationship we have with the FIA means that they're open to some of those ideas as well.
The designs knows exactly the width of the track, the length of the straights that needs to be done. So also the energy management in the race is something which creates overtaking and more entertainment for the fans, including positioning of attack mode, grip levels, walls, runoff areas and everything else.
Formula E is all about going fast, of course, but also efficiency and being able to recover the energy. Track layout is a critical part of this because, of course, depending on the length of the straights, the radius of the corners, whether we have a lot of long, fast corners or slow, tight corners, really impacts the speed of the car in each of these corners, and therefore how much energy we're able to recuperate in the battery.
What is also quite important is to have a pretty wide straight line to allow, let's say, overtaking maneuver, and also that the surface itself is quite clean for guys to basically brake late and outbrake other competitors.
Once this is all taken into account, the track and overlay teams cross-reference by putting the suggested event overlay over the top of the feasibility study of the circuit to make sure everything that is needed can fit within the selected areas. Things like the pit lane, garages, site infrastructure, hospitality buildings, and so on. When everyone on the Formula E side is happy with the design, now that includes the sporting team, who runs simulations on the effect of the circuit on the cars and the racing, it then has to be submitted to the FIA in the form of a homologation dossier. This homologation process is where the number of turns, corner types, safety fences, runoff areas, and so on are considered alongside speed simulations and acceleration and braking parameters. Any potential issues are then reported back to the different Formula E departments to reconfigure and make any necessary tweaks to the track design until a final version is signed off and ready to be added to the calendar. FIA homologation can last between 1 and 3 years, meaning once the design is approved, that circuit configuration can then be used again and again as an FIA homologated track.
So let's fast forward to a few weeks prior to the event and the on-site work begins. The coming together of a workforce, often upwards of 700 people, start building the track infrastructure. Sometimes that's even with traffic and the bustling of city life still going on around them.
We have to put together the build schedule, the build program, we have to produce the concrete blocks, we have to produce the fences that go around the perimeter of the racetrack, and then we have normally about 2 weeks to put the circuit on the ground. We do the race weekend, and then we have, depending on where we are, a week to 2 weeks to get rid of it. So we're on the ground for about 3 weeks in total. We start with securing the venue, setting up offices, getting in power, either pulling it out of the ground from the grid or putting in temporary power infrastructure. And then it comes down to getting those big concrete blocks out. You know, each concrete block around the track is 4 meters long and it's 1 ton per linear meter. So for a 2.5 kilometer racetrack, which is kind of what our standard is, you're looking for about 1,500 concrete blocks in total. You have to schedule the installation of those blocks to suit the local environment. So you can't just shut roads down. You know, you've got to be conscious that people are getting to and from work and travelling around, and the city has to keep functioning. We've got a number of hospitalities that we have to put down. We have all of the garage tents, we have race control, we have the medical centre. Everything has to be created to make that sporting environment work, fit for purpose, user-friendly, but it's going to keep everybody safe. Talking about the Paris racetrack, when we put those blocks and fences down, we do that in live traffic. So we don't shut the roads until the Thursday night, midnight of the race weekend. The blocks and fences that have been designed and developed to really work well with our tracks have evolved to have that versatility. So you can leave gaps between the fences and just take one block out without having to pick everything up for the next 100 meters. You could just leave 1 street open, 2 streets open, just pop a block back in when you need to. It's like a great big Lego Meccano set, you know. It's just, I wouldn't say it's as simple as that, but we've developed it to a point that we can do things seamlessly. By the time you finish and you're in that last week, you've got maybe 700-800 people working on site around an area that could be a mile wide, and you've got trucks, forklifts, you've got trucks delivering race cars, you've got to get the teams and people into the pit lane, so you've got to create footbridges, pedestrian bridges, you've got to think of access, and all of that process takes an awful lot of planning. We are experts in doing this now and popping up a race circuit in cities or in exhibition centres like this, and it's great fun as well. It's a real challenge. It's really good fun.
So right now we're in London, which gives us a unique opportunity to see how a racetrack like this has been designed to fit in a never been done before racing environment, and then how that compares to the sort of racetracks that have become a traditional Formula E city circuit over the years.
You may be surprised to learn that the original designs and discussions around the XL Centre race location began back in Season 3, and took over 18 months of discussions, designs and redesigns to make happen. Although racing in a permanent event space has its advantages, there were some sizable hurdles to overcome to bring racing back to the capital, the indoor track surface being one of the larger challenges.
We're inside this South Hall at Excel, and it's 400 metres long and it's 80 metres wide, but the floor here is a pre-tensioned concrete slab, so you can't just kick into it and dig it all up because you would destroy it. It's a polished concrete floor, and cars coming in here will be sliding all over the place, and if it started to rain and the water came in from outside, you know, it could be an issue. So we found a solution. We had to captive blast about 2.5 millimetres of the surface from the floor. We then put down an agent which chemically bonded with that concrete that's down there. We then broadcast emery over that, which sunk into that agent, and then we covered it with a polymer coating that gave us the required slip resistance value, the slip ratio, to give us the friction surface that the FIA would permit us to race on. And it will stay here for 5 to 10 years. Now that means that Excel as a venue can still operate because the thing is level with the floor. There's no difference. They carpet the events that they have here. Our racetrack is always going to be down there. We can always come back in and reactivate the racetrack each year. And of course it's sustainable because we're not having to put down new asphalt year in, year out. We had to lift the roof up and widen a door so the racetrack can go out of the building at the other end because it wasn't quite wide enough. It's twisty, it's tight. We've got ramps on this track. You know, this is sort of Scalextrics type dreams. To get up and down into this hall, there are ramps that the cars have to go down. We have 20,000 people in this hall, and the cars come out onto the grid, and the drivers are there, these modern day gladiators. You can start lighting up the cars. You can make it a cross between a boxing match ring walk and a live action arena. You can do stuff with music, with lights. You can just turn it into a show. And that's what we want to do, so that the fans that come to see it walk away going, that's unlike anything I've ever seen before. We want to create these experiences and these spectacles, the likes of which people haven't seen before. You're standing here now 4.5 years after we first sketched it, and to be seeing these garages coming together and everything in place, you know, it's really, really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing those cars go out. When that light goes green, it's going to be a hell of a moment.
I can only imagine the feeling they must get, the track design and site build team, when the racing starts, the lights go off, and the work of hundreds of people comes to fruition.
For me, the most emotional moment is always that first time the cars go out on track for the free practice session on a Thursday or a Friday, because all of that hard work, all of that sweat, blood, sweat and tears has led to that moment. And when that green light goes on at the end of the pit lane and the cars go on the track, you know, that's hair on the back of the neck type moments. It's a lovely, lovely time actually, because it's justified everything that's been put into the project.
The life of a racetrack doesn't necessarily end at the checkered flag, however, because after the races are complete, there's information, there's things that have been learnt, and evolutions that can be made to the tracks, like improvements here and there, tweaks to corners, etc., which can then go into evolve the track design ready for the championship's next visit.
Track design in Formula E is a living, organic process, and even a homologated circuit can change between seasons. Turns can be added or taken away, straights can be made longer or shorter, you can add speed to certain areas of the track or slow corners down to improve safety or overtaking potential. The designs and overlay team also look ahead to the future, 2, 3, 4 seasons ahead, making adjustments to the designs to account for changes in the next generation of cars, their speed, weight, and energy capacity. It's very much an ongoing process.
It might be after the race we go, that corner didn't work, or there was an issue there, whether it was a sporting element or from an event perspective, and we take it away and we work on it over the next year and we change it, and then we do another homologation for the next season's race. We might come back 6 months later, 12 months later, and it'll be a completely different road surface. So, you know, we're on it. We've got a team based in each city that is staying attuned and abreast of what's going on with each particular circuit. They feed back to us and we react and change whatever needs to be changed. If you cast your mind back to our first and second season when we were at Battersea Park in London and we did the races there, there were some issues with that track. There were some particularly bumpy sections that was all based on the heritage of the park, and we weren't able to get in and change that in the first year. We went back and did some works and improved that for the second year. And then when we finished that contract with the park, we actually were then beholden to it to put the park back the way it was before we'd started any of that work there. So, you know, we have to go back and look at it not just from a racing perspective, but then how those people can use the park. In Paris, for example, there's a section about 80 meters long of heritage cobblestones on the racetrack. We have to skim that with a temporary asphalt layer every year to be able to do the race. That then needs to be taken out afterwards and put back the way it was. So there's little things like that that we have to take into consideration and make sure it works. And then from a sporting point of view, if we feel that there wasn't enough overtaking or something needed to be made a little bit wider, we will go back and just tweak things to suit. In season 9, we're going to be going into our Gen 3 car. So it's going to be lighter, it's going to be faster. So the FIA and us have to look at what that car might do around that specific circuit. And if that circuit is now a little bit too dangerous, then we have to change something. That might not always be possible. So we need to be future-proofing our circuit designs, and that's where our track and overlay team, they are looking 3-4 seasons ahead to where we might be. What are we looking for in terms of power coming in for the car charging, and then what's the sporting format going to look like? You've seen the introduction over the last couple of seasons of the attack zone. We need a bit of extra space on the track to be able to put that in. It's not always possible. So that's another little challenge that we have. But we go back to that homologation, make sure it's all fresh and works, and the FIA signs it off time and time again.
And finally, there's the sustainability side of track design.
Just like all areas of the championship, sustainability is heavily considered and prioritised within track design too, leaving the streets and areas that are raced on in a better condition than before the championship arrived, and making any changes or adaptations last for the people that use them every day. Sustainability is also considered within the workforce used on site too. By using a large majority of local crew and suppliers for things like the cabling, the building infrastructure, track painting and so on, this lowers the carbon footprint of the championship and helps support local businesses and the local economy. At this point, knowing all that goes into making a Formula E track come alive, you might be asking, why is it important to go through all of this hassle? Months, if not years of work to race in a city centre location, why doesn't Formula E just use permanent circuits?
You want to have that iconic backdrop so that when a fan tunes in to watch us on TV, they go, ah, that's London, or that's New York. There's the Statue of Liberty just in the back of the podium. Ah, that's great. And they identify it really, really iconic. The reason that we don't go out to racetracks that are out in the countryside and established racetracks is because the clean air message and the EV message needs to be made there in those urban environments. And we're taking motorsport to a group of people that probably didn't know about it. There's an urban environment of people out there that aren't going to be jumping in their expensive cars and driving to a Grand Prix circuit out of town 2 hours later. But they can get on public transport, come across town, see a motor race in their city, something they've never seen before, and understand that it's electric. Oh, it's electric, and it's cool, and it's exciting, and it's the future. So, that's, for us, it's so important to be here and doing these urban races.
Racing on temporary city centre circuits presents a unique set of challenges, not just for the design and build teams, but also for the race teams and drivers.
Yeah, one of the particularities of Formula E is that you most of the time race in the city centre, which means the asphalt is never perfect. There is lots of holes and bumps. It's not easy to drive. The grip is very low, and you have to constantly adapt. And the other thing is that the track evolution is very big because nobody uses it, and throughout the day the circuit is getting quicker and quicker. So it's up to the driver to constantly evolve, improve and follow the track evolution.
We go to a lot of places that are new to us, where there's no historical data whatsoever. So we really have to do our homework and make sure that we arrive prepared with a pretty good idea on what our energy profile is going to be.
You cannot test on them, you cannot learn them before, so you have to learn the track, you have to understand how to brake, to corner, where to take risks, where to overtake, very quickly in FP1 and FP2, go to qualify and race everything in a single day. And that's very different from the other racing series.
We are lucky enough to have simulators to try to learn the circuit before we get to the track, because clearly on a track like here in London, so many corners, so many different lines possible, so many curbs and bumps, we have to adapt, and it's a one-day event most of the time.
When you talk to the drivers and people say, oh, is this circuit going to suit that driver? And frankly, nobody knows. No one's been on these circuits before. They're not tracks that people have been growing up on for years and they understand what's happening in every corner. It's new to everybody. And from a sporting point of view, it's those drivers that can adapt best and those teams that can adapt best to a new situation that really triumph. And that's the great and interesting thing about Formula E. And that's why the racing's tight, the championships are always tight. There's no one that just dominates it and walks away with it year after year. And that's what keeps people interested, I think.
Track design and the work that goes into it is one of those sides of motorsport that can often be taken for granted. So much happens before we arrive at a track, you almost don't think about it. I, for one, have definitely found a whole new level of respect for the people and the process. But that's it for another FE Explained. Thank you to everyone who suggested this explainer on track design in the comments of the previous videos. Hopefully, this did the trick.